Hey guys, BJ back again with another Meta Snapshot. It's been a little while since we did one of these, and I'm going to make a little bit of a change to the format today because I was a bit inspired by something that Long Tim did actually, and it got me thinking that I'm not quite happy with the way I've been doing the Meta Snapshot because I've kind of been doing them like a Warlord tier list, and I don't think that's right. I think the idea of a Meta Snapshot is that, let's say someone's taken like a month out of the game or a few weeks and they're coming in, they want to know what is the meta like right now. And I don't think to give you that picture we need to go through every single warlord and put them into like 4 tiers, because the reality is that there is a handful of warlords that really dominate the meta, whether that's the play rate or the win rate. So what I really want to do going forward with the snapshot is just focus in on kind of like, this is what you can expect good to look like. So that means I will do a warlord tier list a bit more infrequently, and I'll do, you know, rank all the warlords, and we'll keep that as a separate thing. Also, the Ecclesiarch often does that, so you can check his channel out. But from a meta snapshot, I'm going to try a slightly different process going forward. So we're going to look at kind of like 3 tiers. If a warlord's not really mentioned on here, I'm kind of counting that as my tier 4 really, which just means everything else. So yeah, let's jump on in and have a look at what the meta looks like as of the 23rd of August. So in tier 3, these are decks which are they're pretty good decks. You can definitely climb with. They are above the rest. As I said, tier 4 is kind of like, if you don't see a warlord mentioned, they're kind of in the rest. So these guys are just a bit above that. They might prey on some of the tier 1 or tier 2 decks, or they might be kind of like up and coming, sort of you know, slightly kind of flying under the radar as well. So that's all kind of like fitting into tier 3. Now the first one in here is actually Harken, World Claimer, and Harken's kind of like snuck in here a little bit under the radar. The reason why Harken's in here, not only is it played a lot because it's like the beginner warlord for Chaos, the most popular faction, but actually right now in this current meta, Harken is actually a pretty decent prey deck. Why is that? Because a lot of the meta now, we're seeing a lot more go wide strategies. So obviously having the blast in addition to the Chaos card pool, which does very well with go wide stuff like Traitor's Hate and Spawnedom. Harken's actually not a bad option right now, and particularly if you haven't yet got the legendary card Warlord Abidan. So we'll take a look at a few of these decks in a minute, but also in tier 3 I've got Galen. I think Galen's not the best Eldar deck anymore, but she is still pretty good. She is a fast deck, she can put pressure on an opponent, and that kind of tempo deck has always consistently been pretty good in the meta. And actually being fast is quite good right now in the meta, because if you can get ahead of some of the combo decks which dominate in the meta, then you have a chance of winning the game. Now, on this entire snapshot, the one deck that I'm probably, I would say, least sure about where I've currently got it is actually Junith. Junith is, I've got her down in tier 3, but I would probably be quite easily persuaded if someone said to me that Junith is higher than this. I know that Papa Beard in our alliance, the Collegium Magistrorum, he has already posted a 3.6k score with Junith. So you know, I might be doing Junith down a little bit. One of the reasons for that might just be that I simply haven't really played Junith this season. So, you know, my personal experience with it is a lot lower. But I will share a deck with you on that. And then Tervagon. Tervagon's a bit like the boogeyman of the meta. Has some pretty good counters into some of the decks. And at the start of the season, I would have had Tervagon a bit higher, but actually the meta has sped up since the start of the season. And even the combo decks tend to be able to go off quite quick. And I feel like Tervagon's just slightly behind the tempo curve. However, the change to the Neurogaunt going down to only 1 energy now does mean that Tervagon does have a slightly earlier combo that can pull off, though it's not a devastating one, but it is pretty good. So I think Tervagon's still there in the meta. It's a bit of a fringe deck anyway. Not loads of people play it, and certainly not lots of people play it well. It's not the easiest deck to pilot. But I do think it's thereabouts, and it can definitely pick up wins against top decks. So let's just take a quick look at a Tervagon and a Junith deck then. Figure out how to do this. So this is like the Tervagon deck. There's not a ton of difference here. Some people are dropping the Predator Instincts. But I always feel like, especially when you build such big units in this deck, that being able to flank for one is very powerful to kind of like fight back for board. Yeah, other than that, it's a fairly standard thing. The biggest thing to note really is obviously the Neurogaunts going down to 1E means that on turn 5 you can play Overwhelming Swarm, and then you could essentially play out every Neurogaunt that you have, which, you know, if you did happen to draw both Neurogaunts with Overwhelming Swarm, that would be insane. These are all costing 0. You can essentially put 6 of them out in any combination that you want. But yeah, that is supremely powerful. And even more so, one of the kind of real winners in this deck, I think, is not the Infestation, Infinite Biomorphologies. Because if you imagine giving them all +2 health, for example, and then dropping that, it's a really powerful turn 5 play. So you want to keep Overwhelming Swarm where you can. But other than that, pretty standard Turgon deck, not changed too much from previous seasons. Let's take a look at the Junith deck that we mentioned. So this is very similar to what Papa Beard, as I say, posted like at 3.6. And so a couple of things to note really about this deck. I mean, obviously the big one being that the once we get 4 Faith, Lead the Righteous becomes pretty inevitable, right? It gives you that kind of late game inevitability that you just kind of got an outgrind value, because that is like probably the most value in a Warlord power in the game, getting 2 Battle Sisters deployed per turn. And at some point you're just going to fall behind if you just keep the game dragging out. So that's obviously why we play Junith. He runs the double Devout Warriors. The Flagellants are fantastic for the clears, especially against the kind of go wide stratagems right now. The Beacon of Faith took a massive buff, being able to get now the additional health to what it previously did. It's a superb 2-drop. He only runs a single prayer, and that's kind of interesting. I think he has commented a little bit on this, but I think the main thing is like that he's really playing hard for the rights of St. Catherine to get, to get the faith, and doesn't feel that it necessarily needs the 2. Plus, spaces are tight in this deck. Obviously, Amalia, the double Death Cult Assassins now make it in due to the buff. They seem to be kind of like not great, but certainly more acceptable, especially in a heal Warlord. And yeah, they're in there in that kind of notoriously weak 3-drop space for Sisters. Now he does run the Miraculous Feat, and I think this card was already pretty good. This card is like super powerful now. And I think what you see Sisters doing a lot now is just using this on the Warlord. Just using it to make Junith herself invulnerable for a turn, and that extends the turn out, and obviously it can get to a point where, you know, you can reach Exorcist turn, or you can reach a great board state for kind of Divine Intervention, that kind of thing. Double Cleansing Flame kind of goes without saying. Interesting though, double Fiery Conviction. Now this is one that you probably haven't seen being played. This actually gives +2 to all your units, a bit like a sort of Storm of Fire. It's kind of costed around the same as that as well, if you think about what Ornvar would have to pay through the Warlord power to get Storm of Fire. This actually works out 1 cheaper. It is melee damage, but again, if you've got the 5 Faith points up, it's actually +3, and that includes your Warlord. So that is really potent and gives you a lot of reach, and I think has got him many wins. The Hollowed Martyrs is superb right now. We're not really seeing much in terms of like Sisters mirror matches, and specifically the Pendant Engines, which used to be the hard counter to this. I don't know if I'd play it if I was playing against like Morven, for example, but other than that, it's a really powerful card. Great, all these pings are very good in these go wide metas. Obviously the relics, you don't leave them without them. Same with the Seraphim, the early clear, Astrid, Divine Intervention. Now he does run a single Celestium, and that is obviously a kind of almost got a soft Vanguard on it, because your opponent is going to get rid of that, because otherwise everything getting +1/+1 is really powerful, given that your Warlord's included in that, and it is a permanent +1. So quite a nice little tech for one of those. I need to try that card since it's been buffed. Like I say, I've not played too much Sisters this season. Double Zephyrin for that kind of those sort of bigger flank removers. The Saint Celestine, the Triumph St. Catherine, who is now absolutely fantastic, and the single Exorcist. So yeah, with the new win cons in there and playing a lot of the cards that received buffs recently, I can certainly see why this card is a much bigger force to be reckoned with, and that is why that one is there in the tier 3 slot. Okay, so next up, let us take a look at the tier 2. So in tier 2, These are really strong decks that are, you know, you're going to see there in the meta. When you look at like the top 50, especially with the new ladder system where we have to pick new factions, you're going to see people playing Anvia Keltok for the Eldar. You're going to see Onvar as this kind of top Tau Warlord, or Swarmlord for the Tyranids, or Gruk for the Orkz, or Abidan for Chaos. So these are like really like the kind of mainstays right now in the meta. I think these 5 are all on a fairly similar power level right now. Interestingly, Abidan wasn't in a great spot at the start of the season, but with some of the changes, which you'll see when we look at Tier 1, Abidan actually has really good matchups into the Tier 1 decks, and that's why Abidan has shot back up. Gruk, on the other hand, I would have had in Tier 1 at the start of the season, but Gruk has had to adapt a little bit because Gruk actually suffers a little bit against the Tier 1 decks, so it drops down a little bit. Swarmlord's kind of like in a race now, so some of the Swarmlord decks are putting more stealth assassin type things in, but the thing with Swarmlord is it can kind of end the game very quick, and I think you need to play fast and you need to build your deck to kind of try and beat the enemy down and use Swarmlord much more aggressively in this current meta. Also pretty good to play the Ravenous Hungers as well, or Rapacious Hunger, whatever that card's called. Just because, again, of all the AoE and all the sort of go wide, low to ground builds that we're seeing, such as Onvar. I mean, Onvar is one of those decks. It can kind of get a Onvar's just really good at kind of combining, keeping up with value with almost any meta deck, but also being able to spread it and go quite wide. So Onvar doesn't invest everything into one big unit. The value is quite spread, and it's quite difficult sometimes to keep up with Onvar. And we've got Targil, who's top of the ladder, who's posted like the best, you know, the best kind of Onvar score this season. And then we got Anvia Keltok. Anvia was kind of quick out of the blocks this season. The buff to the Path of Seer, now only costing 1E, saw people straight out of the gates. There were lots of Eldar, lots of Keltoks being played in the first couple of weeks. It's died off a little bit, but I still think that Keltoks are very powerful. Eldar deck. So, you know, the Reclaim the Stars is still one of the most powerful combos, things Eldar can do. And also they have the Eldritch Storm, and the Eldritch Storm is one of the best AoEs in the game and helps Eldar to deal well with the Tier 1 decks. So let's have a look at some of those. Okay, I'm not going to spend loads of time on them, but this is no, that's not. Yeah, so this is kind of like an example of an Anvia deck, sticking in things like a Warlock for a little bit more early game. I actually don't think that I actually don't run the what's the new 7-drop Crimson Hunter? No, the Waves, the Fire Prism. That's it, with the anti-armor. You could put that in there if you want instead of Spirit Seer, Clonaris, but you know, other than that, the shell is pretty much there. What we're looking to do is obviously reclaim the stars and discount all of our hand and make things very cheap. I don't actually have in here the heal spell, but that's another one that you can put in, particularly if you're getting burned down by stratagems, if the meta's getting too fast for you to cope. But obviously you want to be really conscious of what you need to hold in hand, and particularly Eldritch Storm if you are playing against one of the Tier 1 decks. Gruk combo was what I showed you as a kind of Tier 1 deck last season. What I've actually done here is made a couple of changes and dropped some of the survival things like the Ada's Nails, and actually gone for Crump to Gits, Bomb Squig. Just put a little bit more AoE into the deck to kind of keep up with the faster pace or the combo decks. Commando is a flex choice. Was beginning of the season was proving very powerful for me. It was the only proactive card really in the deck, other than kind of like dropping a Stormboy on 4 perhaps. But what I was finding is that because it's proactive, but because it's in stealth, my opponent can't interact with it, it was proving very powerful. It was definitely helping with some of the slower matchups. I don't know if the meta's too quick. You could definitely drop this and put another like a Bomb Squig in, or something of that nature. But I really found it to be pretty impressive. There's even a question about kind of like whether you need double mucking abouts at the minute as well. But again, the main reason I keep them in there is for chaos. Yeah, the Abidan deck. I run a very similar thing with Harken, to be honest. Although you might want to run the 2-drops with Harken because it has good synergy with the hero power. Where obviously if you put a dark pact on it, it does 2 damage. So that's the only main change I'd make. But this is such a good shell right now. I think this deck is pretty good into the meta. It struggles a bit against Eldar and Tau, but it's really good into particular tier 1 decks. And the main reason for that is having things like Traitor's Hate, having things like Legacy of Vengeance as well. Like, you know, imagine the Scarab deck goes wide and you put double Legacy of Vengeance on. I mean, that's 20 damage right there that you can do to face. Some really interesting counterplay with kind of go wide decks with Abidan. So yeah, pretty well positioned right now against them. What else did we say was tier 2? That's pretty much it, isn't it? Oh yeah, I think this is yeah. This is, I believe, Slyther's deck. I'm not entirely sure. I think it is. But if you're looking at like playing the Tau, this is probably the best you can do. Some people are doing Warshaper and actually doing much better since his sort of minor buff from last season. Pretty good, but I think that people are coming to the consensus that Onvar is still slightly more powerful actually, and gives you a bit more flexibility and obviously a bit more starting health as well, which obviously helps. And this deck, again, as Targil has played and Slyther have played into like the top 5, both on the general ladder and in the Tau individual leaderboard as well. So this is a nice deck for the Tau. So yeah, that is kind of like a glimpse of what some of the tier 2 decks look like. Okay, so what is tier 1 right now? Well, as much as I hate to say it, guys, the way that the meta was forming up early on meant that there was a real opportunity for Orkz and more specifically Scarabs to sneak back into the meta. You will notice on this Meta Snapshot there are no Ultramarine Warlords whatsoever. That's because Ultramarines are probably the worst faction right now, or one of. They got hit so hard last season. They didn't just get, you know, the kind of tweaks and nerfs we were looking for. They got hit over the head with a sledgehammer. So Ultramarines are nowhere to be seen, who actually have a pretty good matchup into Scarabs. And also even things like Imhotep Control, nowhere to be seen. Morven, who has like Penitence and can do well against Scarabs, nowhere to be seen. So Orkz actually just, as it does, it kind of sneaks in, it finds these betas where it just ends up having pretty good matchups all round. And that's why we're forcing decks like Gruk to adapt really to Orkz. And even decks like Anvia, where you've got the Eldritch Storms, yeah, but the Scarabs can often just rebuild. And I'll show you a deck in a minute that kind of goes really all in on the Scarab thing. It's not like a half and half. It's like if you remove them, they're going to come again and again, and it's really, really, really powerful. So Scarabs have very strong matchups into the meta, and that's why they are tier 1. I know that Putis and Slyther are 2 examples of people who are right at the top of the ladder, who are absolutely killing it with this deck. In addition, we have got tier 1 the new faction, the Genestealer Cults, and specifically the legendary warlord Primus Safa Rihanna. Now, she is most definitely a trendsetter in this new meta. She has brought a, if you've not seen my deck guide on 4x4 Uprising, go and check it out. That is pretty much the deck. There's a few cards that you can kind of tech and kind of swap around and test, but the shell of that is phenomenal. It's brought in an Uprising build, which is essentially a combo deck, and the thing that makes it tier 1 though is the consistency. Usually combo decks are powerful, but the problem with them is that they're inconsistent. And what Rihanna allows you to do is to build the deck in a way where you only play 3 to 4 stratagems, and you essentially, that means that because she can, her ability says she can draw a stratagem, you can basically draw them every single game by E6, which is kind of what you need. So we'll take a look at these 2 tier 1 decks so you can see what it is I'm talking about. If you enjoyed this so far, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, a like and subscribe and all that jazz. So here's the Scarabs. So here's an example. Again, I'm personally not playing the Scarabs this season. And so I'm kind of bringing to you kind of a version, but don't be surprised if there's a few cards that you change. But what you're basically seeing here in this deck is a heck of a lot of stratagems, right? Things like double hyperlogical strategists, where you can play the card and then you can play the second card, giving you 2 stratagems there. Also against Gene Stealers often put stratagems in your hand, which is lovely for Scarabs, right? Because that just feeds the Scarab engine. And this card has really benefited, as Slyther tells me, from the Disruption Blades that got the buff, giving +2 melee now to units instead of +1. This just means that a board full of Scarabs is absolutely disgusting. Like, the power that they're putting out. You've got 8 Scarabs and they all have 3 attack. You know? 24 damage for such little investment. That's super powerful. We've been running things like the Solar Pulse, so if people try and, I don't know, stealth you, and that's how they're trying to get around your Scarabs trading the board. We've even got an answer to that. Of course, you've got the double things like Skyve Assault for the anti-AoE, and you've also got the double self-destructions for the finish, and an alternative win con in a Triarch Stalker. If you feel that's too slow, you could drop that. But the other thing that is really interesting I saw Pooties playing is the double Immortal Pride. This card's kind of dropped off a little bit, but not here, right? Because you can afford to play 6 when you've got a board full of Scarabs. And importantly, in a Scarab deck, what this does is it makes the Warlord talent, which only costs 1, suddenly costs 0, meaning that you've got an automatic Warlord talent and Scarab generating spell for free every single turn, which is, not to mention, obviously, it puts armor on your Lord, making you a bit safer. So yeah, that is a Scarab deck. This is very much like the Marmite of Warpforge, guys. It's like people either hate this deck and hate playing against it. They actually hate the existence of this deck in the game. And other people just love it. But I can promise you that right now this is very powerful. And if you want to climb, this is definitely a tier 1 deck in this meta. Alright, so last but not least, let's take a look at 4x4 Rising. As I say, I have a full video guide on this, so you can go and check that out. You'll see a couple of changes. I play with the numbers sometimes between 1 and 2, like Nexos and Icon Bearers. These are the cards that kind of, you know, they're sort of what I call like outside the combo cards. So at the minute, I'm just running a single copy of them, but you can definitely run 2. There's also a question of which stratagems do you actually play, and I explained that the first 4 in this 4x4 stands for no more than 4 stratagems, right? So currently I've got like the Perfect Ambush, because this is quite a cool card to be able to play on a giant hybrid metamorph, or even sometimes to just drop on something like the Knife Icon Bearer, so that you can kind of like just keep generating knife neophytes. So yeah, it's just a really cheap and effective stratagem. But obviously the big one we're looking for is the Rampant Infestation. And we can pretty much always get this by E6, because of the way the deck's designed, which means that we can go off and we can pull off a combo on E6, where we essentially flood the entire board with all our hand. If we've got the defense card, we can even refill for 1, and that allows us to play this card, which has now been discounted to 1. So that refill 1 allows us to play this on E6 too. If we haven't got the defense card, then we just go off on turn 7, or sorry, E7, if we've got the hybrid metamorph. So there's like 3 or 4 different kind of combos. You know, you're really looking to get this guy if you can, because he's awesome in this deck. Or you're looking to have the metamorph for a go tall combo. There's various different combos that you can pull off, which I talk more about in the deck guide, so I won't repeat it all here. Go watch that video. But this deck is very powerful, guys. It's completely shaping the meta, and that's why it's tier 1. Can it be beat? Yeah, it can absolutely be beat. Most of the kind of go wide board's quite low, so AoE is really good. The challenge is when they get the hybrid metamorph off with the go wide, which they don't always do, but when they do, you kind of need AoE and something like a stun to really survive that. So it is quite demanding and specific, but there are ways to beat it. But yeah, it's tier 1 because the meta is being basically shaped quite largely now by this deck. So there we go, guys. That is my that is what I believe to be a pretty good snapshot of where the meta is right now. Like I say, shamed not to see any Space Marines. Potentially there's things like Gazgul and Zephyr Blade perhaps potentially could be in tier 3, although they're not being played too much. And as I said, potentially Junith is slightly off. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But let me know what you think, guys. How does this reflect your experience? Like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, hope you enjoy the new format. I'll see you in the next one.